Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda and it is Friday. So I'm here with 5 on Friday. And I'm gonna give you my usual spiel. Ooh, I got a little sparkle on my thing here. I don't have my light on, but sorry. My usual spiel about 5 on Friday. This was started by Suey over at Suey's Book Banter. So please go check out her channel. She is currently taking a break from 5 on Friday, but she should be back with it soon. And the idea is each Friday we give you a themed list of 5 books. And our styles are very different. She is much more edited, and I usually set a timer for 5 minutes and just go. If you've seen the length of this video, you will know that's not what I do this time. I do reserve the right to kind of toy with that now and then. And I'm toying with a lot in this video. So I'm not just toying with the 5-minute thing, but I'm also toying with just the 5 thing. And that is because the topic of this, I kind of have to, there's exceptions. Let's just put it that way. So what I'm talking about today are where to start with certain authors. I've got 5-ish suggestions for you with 5-ish authors. So I get asked quite frequently where someone should start with Agatha Christie. And that's kind of what started this whole thing. And a lot of people say, who are asked this question, say start with And Then There Were None with Agatha Christie. And I actually don't agree with that. Only because I think And Then There Were None is her best book. And when you start at the top, there's only one way to go. And a lot of Agatha Christie is excellent, but there's also a lot of not excellent Agatha Christie. So you're setting yourself up to, it's just, don't ever start with the best. And so I actually thought about this one. Where would I recommend someone to start? And I don't have a specific book, but I have a type of book. And there are currently in the US 4 of these released, and I believe there's another one coming soon. I have all 4. But one of them is in a pile somewhere, so I have 3 right here. And these are these short story collections put out by her current publisher, the estate's current publisher, which is William Morrow. So here I have A Deadly Affair, which are stories that have some kind of love story component to it, or something to do with the heart. I have The Last Seance, and this is Tales of the Supernatural. This is an interesting one because she did write a few supernatural stories. But a lot of these are kind of like Scooby-Doo supernatural. And this one is Midwinter Murder. This is set in winter. This also includes the story that Three Blind Mice? But it's the setting for, or the source for The Mousetrap, which was the longest running play. I like these because Agatha Christie, as you know, actually has several different detectives that she writes. Plus, she writes standalones and she writes she's deceased, under the Mary Westmacott title, pseudonym. And these all have different feels. And these all have at least one selection from each of her detectives. They also have some standalones. Midsummer Mysteries, set in the summer, which is the one that's in a pile somewhere, actually has one that's very Mary Westmacott-ish. So when you get this, you're getting a nice survey of her writing in short story form, and you can decide which version of Agatha Christie works for you. There are people who love Poirot but can't stand Marple, or vice versa. I sometimes struggle with Tommy and Tuppence. Tommy and Tuppence can be a little much for me sometimes. Harley Quinn, kind of like, what is Harley Quinn? You know, but I love Poirot and I love Marple and I love her standalones. So this will give you a nice taste of where to go with Agatha Christie, because Agatha Christie is a very approachable writer. I think that everyone can find something that works for them with Agatha Christie, but there might also be things that don't work, and this will give you a chance to find out what that is. Okay, so that was number 1. And number 2, I'm going to toy with the idea of 5 again. And that's because I'm actually going to group 3 writers together. And these are the Brontes. So Charlotte, Emily, and Anne. Now, people generally just group these writers together anyway. That's not entirely fair because they are each unique in their own way. but they are also things that tie the three of them together. And people always say, where should I start with the Brontes? And the common answer is Jane Eyre. And I don't agree with that one. It's not that I don't love Jane Eyre. I do love Jane Eyre. But kind of like And Then There Were None, Jane Eyre is a very good one. I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't go so far as to say it's the best Bronte novel because, again, three different authors. It's how do you quantify that? But I would say it's the best Charlotte Bronte novel, and I think there's a big drop to get to the other ones. So there's that. I definitely would not say Wuthering Heights because that's a tough book. That is a very tough book. That is like your culmination. Your culmination of the Bronte should be Wuthering Heights. I went for an Anne Bronte book. Now, I went for Anne Bronte for basically three reasons. One is Anne Bronte doesn't get the respect she deserves. Two, Anne Bronte is my favorite. And three, Anne Bronte is the most approachable of the three Brontes. She's going to be the easiest for someone who doesn't read a lot of classics, who maybe isn't that comfortable with Victorian literature. And now Anne Bronte wrote two books. Her second book is actually my favorite Bronte novel, which is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. But I'm actually going with her first book, which is Agnes Grey. Now, this book gets overshadowed a lot. When an author has two books, it just gets overshadowed by the one that people, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is a very important book. It was a very controversial book. It's a very hard-hitting book. So, of course, her other book's going to be kind of overshadowed by that. Also, it's a governess tale, so people compare it to Jane Eyre. I personally don't think that's especially fair because I think they're different stories and they're saying different things. But just that common thread, it kind of gets shadowed by Jane Eyre. It is the shortest of the Bronte novels, except for maybe The Professor, which no one reads, by Charlotte Bronte. That was her first book she wrote, but it was published posthumously. I think that one might actually be shorter. But this is an easy book to follow. If you are coming to the Brontes from the world of Jane Austen, this is a nice bridge into the Brontes because I think it doesn't read like Jane Austen, but it does feel kind of like a nice step from that. So yes. Now, if you have never read the Brontes or you've never read Agnes Grey and you'd like to, stay tuned to March 2025. March on the moors. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. Okay, now I'm going to go back and be one author, one book. So the next author I have on my list that people have asked me where to start is Jennifer Weiner, and this one is hard. If you don't know who Jennifer Weiner is, she is a contemporary author. She's been writing all of her adult life. She's just a few years older than I am. She started in her 20s. She's in her 50s now. I don't like this term, but she embraced it for at least a good chunk of her career, and that is chick lit. I don't think that's a fair description of her work. I would say the term that's kind of used now, which I also don't especially like, but I think if I say it, you might get an idea of what it is book club fiction. Where to start with her. And the reason it's so difficult is that her writing always reflects where she is in her life. So you have a great variance in what she's doing. The other problem is I think she's going through a midlife crisis right now because her last couple books have been not as successful for me. So where do you start with her when she has a nice spectrum of books? Now, normally you'd say start with her first book, which is Good in Bed. I wouldn't say that. Now, I actually like Good in Bed, and I reread it again a few years ago as an adult. And it's still enjoyable. It is, however, dated. So in that terms, I don't think it holds up. It will give you a really good feel of her writing and kind of like how she draws her personal self into her books. And again, I wouldn't recommend any of her more recent books. Her middle of career is probably where she's strongest, but I honestly think the best book to start with her is In Her Shoes, which is her second book. And the reason I say that is because you still are kind of at the beginning of her career. So you see the seeds of where she's writing. It isn't as dated as Good in Bed. You also start seeing a lot of the things recurring themes that you see over and over again in her books. Now, those show up in Good and Bad, but one of the issues is they're a little heavy-handed there. They're done with a lighter touch in this book. There's a movie version of this book, which is fairly good, but still read the book. Still read the book. Always read the book. Yes, it's an enjoyable book. It is very, I mean, she's a very approachable writer. Anyone can read her and pick her up. But yeah, if you want to, I would say my thing is I would stay within her shoes, and maybe at some point, actually, in some point, I would recommend reading Good in Bed, because there's a sequel to it called Certain Girls, which is actually really good, but you need to read Good in Bed first. So but I would say start within her shoes and then kind of sort of meander chronologically up her career. Okay, the next one is one that I'm going to preface this by saying there's still a lot of this author's backlist that I have yet to read, but I'm working on it. So I'm only going by the books that I have read, and that is Alice Hoffman. Now, a lot of people say start with Practical Magic. I do not, and this is not because I don't like Practical Magic. I do. It is because Practical Magic is part of a quartet of books, which is a weird thing because she wrote Practical Magic and then like 20 years later continued the series. So it was written as a standalone, but it isn't. And even if you look at that quartet, I wouldn't read Practical Magic first. So I wouldn't start with Practical Magic. I would actually start with a book that people don't talk about that much, but it's called The Probable Future. Now this book, I don't know if it was written before or after Practical Magic. It definitely feels like it's written in the same world, like just in another part of Massachusetts. Like, Practical Magic is going on here and Probable Future is going on here. And that was just a car that backfired. So don't worry, there's no gunshots. Sorry. It is a shorter book. It's a tighter book. And I don't want to say that into saying that sometimes that Alice Hoffman is sort of a loose writer, meandering writer. She isn't, but she does have some books that are, you follow a thing through time. Like The Red Garden is a book where you follow a town through time, sort of thing. Some of her books are like that, and that's fine because that's just the structure of the book. But this is a traditional kind of story with a beginning, middle, and end. It does have a little, her little touch of magical realism that's in there, so you'll get a feel of where she likes to go with her books. This is a very springy book, so if you want to give it a try, I'd wait till like March, April, May to read it because it just feels like spring. But yeah, it's short. It will give you a good chance to taste her book, taste her writing, see if you like it, and then move on to her other books. Again, I am qualifying this by saying that I am working on her backlist. There may come a book that I might supersede this in my recommendation, but as of right now, it is The Probable Future. And finally, my fifth author is one that I read like constantly in the 90s, and then I just overdid it. So I stopped reading her for a while, thinking I would just take a break. And now 30 years later, I'm getting back to her. And it's not because she's bad. It's just because I read too many of her books at one time, back to back. And that's Maeve Binchy. So Maeve Binchy was an Irish author. She was pretty prolific. She basically life in Ireland sort of books. Like Jennifer Weiner, she kind of lots of times wrote from her own experience and her own place in life. Some of her books can be a little slice of lifey, which means, again, kind of like The Red Garden, you're kind of following a slice of life. There's not as strong a plot. But the one that I am actually recommending does have a bit more of a plot, and I think that's why I would recommend it. It might be her most well-known book. It was made into a movie, which wasn't very good, but and that is Circle of Friends. So this is a coming-of-age novel. It does a really good, it ends differently than the movie. So if you've ever seen the movie, that's not how the book ends. But it has these very vibrant characters. They're vibrant, but they're also very ordinary in that there are people that you would just meet in the world. They're just like people like you and me sort of characters. And it's just a very well-drawn story, well-drawn world. It will give you a really strong introduction to her writing. And it's just very enjoyable. So that's where I would start with Maeve Binchy, is Circle of Friends. So those are my suggestions. Let me know if you disagree with any of them. If you know an Alice Hoffman that maybe someone should start with that I haven't read yet, because I might push that one up the list. Yeah, so let me know what you think of those. Like, subscribe, join my Discord, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.